"I'm sorry," Linda Patterson said, wiping tears from her face. "I shouldn't be crying on your show. Let's talk about the book." She was sitting across from Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show, trying desperately to compose herself, trying to be a good guest, trying to remember she was there to promote her cookbook, not to fall apart on national television. But Linda couldn't stop crying. Because 3 minutes earlier, Johnny had asked a simple question. This cookbook focuses on family meals. What inspired that? And Linda had made a mistake. She'd mentioned her daughter, Sarah, the girl who used to help her test recipes, the girl who loved chocolate chip cookies, the girl who died 3 months ago. Linda tried to apologize again. "I'm so sorry. This is unprofessional. Johnny interrupted. His voice was firm but kind. "Linda, don't apologize for crying. Don't ever apologize for grieving your child." The audience was silent. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was something else, something raw, something real. Linda looked at Johnny, saw something in his face she didn't expect. Understanding, not pity, not discomfort, actual understanding. "You've lost someone too," Linda said. It wasn't a question. Johnny nodded. And then, for one of the rare times in his career, Johnny Carson let his private pain show on television, about loss, about grief that doesn't end, about carrying something unbearable while the world expects you to function. For 12 minutes, millions of Americans watched two people who'd experienced unbearable loss sit together in shared pain. No jokes, no commercial breaks, just two people acknowledging that some losses are too big to hide. This is the story of the night Johnny Carson broke his usual boundaries about privacy, and why sometimes the most important thing television can do is make space for grief. Linda Patterson was 42 in November 1982. A food writer for 15 years, she'd written 3 cookbooks. Her 4th, Family Tables, had just been published, about the importance of family meals. Her publisher arranged a publicity tour, including The Tonight Show. Landing Johnny Carson was huge, career-making exposure. Linda prepared her talking points, practiced her stories. What she wasn't ready for was how impossible it would be to talk about family meals without mentioning Sarah. Sarah Patterson was 16 when she died. August 15th, 1982, 3 months before Linda sat across from Johnny. Sarah had been driving home from a friend's house. Responsible kid, good driver, sober, did everything right. The other driver didn't. He was drunk. Ran a red light, hit Sarah's car on the driver's side. She died instantly. He walked away with minor injuries. Sarah was Linda's only child, her daughter, her best friend, the person who tested every recipe, who was supposed to outlive her. The interview started well. Johnny was warm, professional, asked about Linda's background as a food writer, her previous books, how she developed recipes. Linda answered smoothly, stayed on message. Then Johnny asked the question that broke her. "This new book focuses on family meals. What inspired that particular focus?" Linda smiled, started to answer. "I've always believed that families need time together, that sitting down for a meal creates connection. My daughter Sarah loved." Linda stopped, heard what she'd said. Past tense, loved, not loves. Loved. Her throat closed, her eyes filled with tears. She tried to keep going. "Sarah loved helping me in the kitchen. She'd test recipes. Tell me if they were terrible." Linda's voice broke. "She was my best critic." The tears spilled over. Linda grabbed a tissue from the box on Johnny's desk, wiped her eyes, tried to compose herself. "I'm sorry," Linda said. "I shouldn't be this emotional. Let's talk about the book." Johnny didn't move on, didn't pivot to something lighter, didn't do what television hosts are trained to do. Instead, he leaned forward slightly. His voice was gentle. "You mentioned Sarah in past tense. What happened?" Linda started crying harder, because nobody on the publicity tour had asked that. Everyone had avoided it, talked around it, pretended they hadn't noticed. "She died," Linda said, 3 months ago. A drunk driver hit her car. She was 16 years old. The studio audience was completely silent. This cookbook interview had just become something else, something television usually avoided. Raw grief, unmanageable emotion, the kind of pain that makes people uncomfortable. Linda tried to apologize again. "I'm so sorry. This is unprofessional. I shouldn't have brought her up. We can talk about the recipes, about—" Johnny interrupted. "Linda, Stop apologizing. His voice was firm. Don't apologize for crying. Don't ever apologize for grieving your child. Linda looked at Johnny, really looked at him, and saw something she didn't expect. Recognition, understanding, the kind that only comes from experience. You've lost someone too, Linda said quietly. Johnny nodded. He didn't elaborate, didn't give details, but his voice carried weight when he spoke. I understand what it's like to lose someone you love, to try to function in a world that expects you to be okay, to feel like you're supposed to have moved on when the grief is still drowning you. Linda started crying harder, not from sadness, from relief, because someone understood. Someone wasn't telling her it would get better, or that Sarah was in a better place, or that time heals all wounds. Someone was just acknowledging that this was unbearable, and that it was okay to not be okay. When Linda finished, she wiped her eyes. I'm sorry. That was too much. I shouldn't have. Johnny stopped her again. Linda, listen to me. What you're feeling right now, the fact that you can't talk about family meals without mentioning Sarah, that's not something to apologize for. That's love. Linda's face crumpled. Because nobody had said that. For 3 months, people had been patient, understanding, but also subtly suggesting she should be getting better, moving on, functioning. And here was Johnny Carson telling her that talking about Sarah wasn't a failure, it was love. Does it get easier? Linda asked. Johnny paused, considered his answer carefully. No, he said honestly, it doesn't get easier. You just get used to carrying it. The grief becomes part of you, and you learn to live with weight that never gets lighter. The audience was completely still. This wasn't what anyone had tuned in for, but it was what they needed to see. 2 people talking about loss, honestly, without platitudes, without false hope, just truth. The world wants you to move on, Johnny continued, wants you to stop crying, stop mentioning her, get back to normal. But there is no normal anymore. There's just before and after, and you're living in the after. Linda nodded. Everyone keeps telling me it will get better. That time heals. But it's been 3 months, and it feels worse. Like everyone else has moved on, and I'm stuck. Johnny's voice was gentle but firm. You're not stuck. You're grieving. And grief doesn't follow a timeline. 3 months, 3 years, 3 decades. It doesn't matter. Sarah was your daughter. You're allowed to grieve her for the rest of your life. Linda wiped her eyes again, looked at Johnny with something like gratitude. Thank you, she said, for not making me stop talking about her. Everyone else wants me to move on, to focus on the positive, to be grateful for the time I had. But I just want to talk about her, and everyone acts like that's unhealthy. Johnny shook his head. It's not unhealthy. It's love. Sarah was your daughter. She's supposed to be in everything you do, every conversation, every thought. That doesn't mean you're not healing. That means you're her mother. Linda broke down completely, because those words, you're her mother, present tense, not were, are. She was still Sarah's mother. Eventually, Johnny asked about the book. Let Linda talk about her recipes, about family meals, and Linda was able to talk about it, because Johnny had given her permission to mention Sarah, to let her daughter be part of the conversation. Linda talked about Sarah's favorite recipes, the ones they'd tested together, the ones she couldn't make anymore because they hurt too much. Johnny listened, asked questions, treated Sarah's memory with respect. When the interview ended, Johnny stood up, walked around the desk, and hugged Linda, not for the cameras, just because she needed it. Thank you for talking about her, Johnny said quietly. She sounds like she was wonderful. Linda nodded. She was. She really was. The response to that interview was overwhelming. Thousands of letters poured into NBC, from parents who'd lost children, from people who'd experienced loss and felt pressured to hide their grief, from viewers who'd never experienced that kind of pain but learned something from watching. People thanked Johnny for making space for grief on television, for not pivoting to something lighter, for treating Linda's pain with respect. Linda received letters too, from other parents who'd lost children, telling her they understood, that they still talked about their kids, that grief didn't follow anyone's timeline, that she wasn't alone. Many mentioned Johnny's words, "Don't apologize for grieving your child." You're still her mother. Those phrases became touchstones. Permission to feel, to remember, to not be okay. Linda went on to become an advocate for mothers against drunk driving, used her platform as an author to talk about the devastation drunk driving causes, spoke at schools, at community events, told Sarah's story, not to be inspirational, but to be honest, to put a face and a name to statistics, to make people understand what accident really means. She always credited that Tonight Show interview, said Johnny gave her permission to be publicly broken, to talk about Sarah without apologizing, and that permission helped her find purpose in her pain, not meaning. Linda never said Sarah's death had meaning, but purpose, using her voice to prevent other parents from joining this unbearable club. Years later, Linda wrote a memoir about losing Sarah. In it, she talked about that Tonight Show interview, about how terrified she'd been, how she'd tried to stay professional, how she'd apologized repeatedly for crying, and how Johnny's words changed something for her. When Johnny told me not to apologize for grieving my child, something shifted. I'd been carrying guilt on top of grief, guilt for not being okay yet, for not moving on, for mentioning Sarah constantly. Johnny's words gave me permission to stop apologizing for love. There's no hierarchy of loss, no timeline for grief, no right way to carry unbearable pain. Linda lost her 16-year-old daughter and would never be okay, would carry Sarah with her forever, would mention her constantly, would cry at unexpected moments, would live in the after, and Johnny told her that was okay. That was love. That was being a mother. Even when your child is gone, you're still their parent, and that identity, that love, doesn't need to apologize for existing. If you've lost someone, know that grief doesn't follow anyone's rules. Subscribe for more stories about giving pain space. Share this with someone who needs permission to not be okay. Comment. Who do you carry with you? Because Linda Patterson taught us something that night, that grief isn't something to overcome. It's something to carry, that talking about who we've lost isn't dwelling, it's love, that being broken isn't failure, it's proof that we loved someone who mattered. And Johnny Carson taught us something too, that sometimes the most important thing we can say